My name is Amelia Holtz. My father sent me $6,000 a month while deployed, trusting I'd be safe and cared for. But when he walked into my near-empty apartment after 9 months overseas, all it took was one look in the fridge, and everything exploded. Where are you watching this from today? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you've ever trusted someone who left you broken and alone, stay with me. Because I didn't stay broken for long. You'd think you'd have time to prepare for a moment like that. You'd think 9 months of silence and distance would soften the edges. But no. When the front door creaked open and my dad stepped inside, I forgot how to breathe. Colonel David Holtz didn't need to yell. He never did. His silence alone could empty a room. So when his boots hit the scuffed laminate and his eyes swept across the tiny, half-furnished apartment, my silence screamed louder than anything. He paused in front of the fridge, pulled it open, then slowly closed it again. No food, just a half bottle of mustard, some wilted lettuce in the crisper, and a single yogurt cup I was saving for dinner. "Amelia," he said, and the sound of his voice sent every nerve in my body buzzing. His tone wasn't angry. It was worse, controlled, grave. "Where's all your food?" he asked, each word clipped and heavy. I stood frozen by the kitchen table, still in my worn-out hoodie and threadbare socks, and suddenly every excuse I'd practiced collapsed like matchsticks. My throat caught. Stepmom took the cards. His head tilted just slightly. The way he used to when interrogating cadets, I'd seen it in his posture before I saw it in his eyes. "She took them," he said. "Which ones?" "All of them." My voice sounded small. "The debit, the credit, the one linked to your base account," she said. I hesitated, then looked down at the floor. "She said if I told you, she'd cut me off completely, leave me with nothing." For a full 10 seconds, he didn't say a word, not a breath, just stared at the fridge like it had personally betrayed him. Then, slowly, he turned to the counter, gripped the edge so hard his knuckles turned bone white. I don't think I'd ever seen my dad look scared before, not during his deployments, not during Mom's funeral. But right then, in my cold, quiet kitchen, he looked like a man discovering the house he built had been burning behind him all along. He pushed away from the counter, his movements sudden and sharp. "Get your coat," he said. "Dad," he didn't raise his voice, just pointed to the door with a stiffness that made something in my chest crack. "Get your coat." So I grabbed it. No more questions, no more explanations. Just the sting of being caught in a lie I didn't tell, and a truth I had no idea how to explain. Because how do you tell the man who taught you honor that while he was risking his life overseas, his wife was draining his daughters? The drive to La Mesa was dead silent. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional blinker click as my dad took sharp, decisive turns. He didn't look at me. Not once. And honestly, I didn't blame him. I stared out the window, watching familiar neighborhoods blur past. Streets I used to rollerblade on. A diner I once cried in after Sharon grounded me for forgetting to text back. Everything looked smaller now. Crooked. Like it was never real to begin with. My heart pounded as we pulled into the driveway of her picture-perfect, lemon-scented prison. Sharon's house, my dad's house, was perched at the top of a hill, wrapped in pastel paint and rose bushes manicured like they were in competition with Buckingham Palace. But my stomach twisted the moment I saw her silhouette in the window. She opened the front door before we even knocked, standing there with a glass of white wine in hand and a pink cashmere cardigan draped just so over her shoulders. A vision of Stepford calm. "David," she purred, like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't been stealing from his daughter while he was thousands of miles away dodging sandstorms and classified threats. She glanced at me for half a second, then smiled wider. "Amelia, how lovely." My dad didn't return the smile. He stepped inside without invitation, jaw tight. I followed, legs trembling. The house smelled like citrus candles and betrayal. "I'm going to need all the financial documents," he said flatly. "Bank cards, statements, anything with my name or Amelia's." Sharon tilted her head with theatrical confusion. "Oh, come on, honey, is this really necessary?" "Don't honey me." His voice was ice. She blinked, then with a little smirk, reached into a drawer by the entryway and pulled out a small stack of cards, my cards. She fanned them like poker chips and held them up. "Relax," she said. "I only used them for things that benefited the house. Groceries, utilities, and maybe a few lifestyle upgrades. Nothing major." "You took every cent I sent her," he said, stepping forward, not yelling but commanding. "And I gave her a roof, a bed, warm meals when she showed up. She's not exactly helpless, David. She could have called you." My voice came out raw. "You told me you'd cut me off, that if I made a fuss, I'd be on my own." Sharon let out a laugh, dry, dismissive. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Amelia. You needed structure, a little discipline. You were eating junk and skipping class. I gave you limits." Dad's eyes narrowed like he was seeing her for the first time. "And what about the $6,000 a month I wired?" he asked. "Where'd that go?" Her smile sharpened. "To the right place," she said. "To me, because now I control every dollar she gets." She looked proud, like she'd just delivered a punchline. David stepped back slowly, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Excuse me," he muttered, pulling out his phone and walking to the edge of the patio. I watched him through the sliding glass door as he paced once, twice, then stopped, speaking low and serious into the phone. When he returned, something in him had shifted. He was composed, cold, military-grade calm. "I just called the lawyer," he said softly. "Divorce proceedings start tonight." The room fell silent. Sharon's face twitched, a flicker of panic. "David, don't be ridiculous. This isn't a discussion," he interrupted. "You abused my daughter while I was deployed. That ends now." From the hallway, a soft shuffle. Then a figure stepped out, Brielle, Sharon's daughter. 16, all lip gloss and earbuds and wide, frightened eyes. She didn't say a word, just stared at me. I hadn't seen her in months. Not since Sharon told her I was a freeloader with daddy issues. And now there she was, frozen in the doorway like a witness to a crime scene. Sharon opened her mouth, searching for some lifeline in her script, but David was already walking out the door. "Let's go, Amelia." I followed, leaving behind the smell of lemon cleaner and rot. As we stepped back into the car, the gravity of it all hit me like a punch to the chest. The cards, the threats, the silence, the way Sharon looked at me like a burden she couldn't write off fast enough. But this time, someone had looked back. Someone had seen it for what it was, and he'd chosen me. My dad had chosen me. It didn't fix everything. Not yet. But for the first time in almost a year, I didn't feel invisible. And that was something. That night, we didn't talk much on the way back to my apartment. My dad kept one hand on the wheel and the other clenched in a tight fist on his thigh, like he was trying to keep from punching the dashboard. His jaw worked in silence, and I didn't dare interrupt whatever storm was happening behind those steel blue eyes. We didn't stop for dinner. He didn't ask if I'd eaten. He already knew the answer. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was thick, like fog with weight to it. It filled the car, wrapped around my shoulders, and followed us up the stairs to the second-floor apartment I'd called home these past 9 months. When I unlocked the door and pushed it open, something cracked in his face. Maybe it was the sagging futon, the chipped plates on the sink, the stack of cereal boxes I'd been rotating through like meal plans. Maybe it was just the sheer absence of anything resembling comfort. He stood in the doorway for a long time before finally stepping in slowly, like the air inside might hurt him. "You don't have curtains," he murmured. "I couldn't afford blackout ones and the cheap ones wouldn't stay up." I laughed a little. It came out shaky. He crossed the room in 2 strides and sat on the edge of the couch, head bowed. "Why didn't you tell me, Millie?" God, that nickname. I hadn't heard it since I was 15. I sat beside him and wrapped my arms around my knees. "'Cause you were on a mission. I didn't want to be the thing that pulled your focus." His voice cracked before he caught it. "You are never a distraction." My throat tightened. "She told me if I told you, she'd clean out everything, and I believed her. She had the passwords, she had everything." He ran both hands over his face and leaned back, staring at the ceiling like it held all the answers. "I should have seen it coming. I gave her too much control. I didn't think. You trusted her," I said quietly. "So did I, and there it was. The mutual ache, the mutual shame. We both fell for the same lie, just from different angles." After a long silence, he stood up, walked to the kitchenette, and opened the fridge again. Then he turned to me and said, "Tomorrow we grocery shop. Real food. I'm talking meat produced, not just cereal and sadness." I laughed, really laughed this time. He smiled, just barely. The next few days were like waking up after a long winter. started with a trip to the flea market. He bought a battered bookshelf and made me promise to fill it with more than just textbooks and stress. We stopped at a thrift store where he made me pick out actual curtains. Bright yellow ones with little sunflowers. I tried to protest. He waved his card like a sword and said, "Non-negotiable. We are banishing gray from this apartment." The laughter came easier. The silence less suffocating. We painted the walls a soft sage green, hung up string lights, replaced the peeling coffee table with a solid wooden one that still had carved initials from some past life. Every evening, we'd sit side by side on the couch, watching reruns of his favorite crime shows while passing a bowl of popcorn between us like it was some sacred ritual. I forgot how loud he laughed, how he always made 2 cups of tea before bed, one for him, one for whoever might need it. He started leaving handwritten notes on the fridge. "Lunch in the fridge. Eat it or face consequences. Proud of you, you have a kind heart and a steel spine. Text me when you get home or I'll stage a full military extraction." I began to feel like someone again. Not a problem, not a burden, not invisible. Someone worth protecting, someone worth showing up for. One night, as we sat on the couch, the lamp casting a warm glow over the now cozy apartment, he nudged me gently with his elbow. "You know, you were never supposed to survive all that alone." I looked at him. "But I did." He nodded slowly. "You did. You kept breathing, didn't you?" I swallowed hard. "Some days that was all I managed." "That's still surviving," he said. "But now we rebuild." He didn't mean just furniture or groceries, I knew that. He meant the version of home we'd both been missing for years. I didn't say it out loud, but in my head I promised I'm not letting anyone steal that from me again. Not the money, not the safety, not the warmth of someone looking at you like you matter. That chapter was closed. We were writing something new now, one sunflower curtain at a time. It had been exactly 6 days since my father stepped back into my life, and every night since I fell asleep easier. The air in the apartment felt different now. Warmer. Not because of the new throw blankets or the cheap but cheerful lamp we found at the thrift store, but because there was laughter in the walls again. Because when I came home, someone was waiting. That morning, I made pancakes. Not because we had somewhere to be, but because I wanted to see my dad's face light up when I flipped one without breaking it. And it did. He grinned like I'd just won a cooking show. "You know," he said, buttering the 3rd one, "I might extend my leave. Couple more days of this and I'll forget what sand even feels like." I rolled my eyes. "Don't get used to being spoiled." We were still eating when a knock came at the door. 3 soft raps. Then a pause. I froze. Dad stood slowly, shoulders stiffening. It wasn't paranoia. He had the instincts of someone who'd seen too many surprises go sideways. He opened the door, and there she was, Sharon, standing in ballet flats and a pale pink blouse, holding a cake box like it was a peace treaty. Beside her, Brielle lingered awkwardly, hugging her arms, eyes down. "David," Sharon said with that syrupy voice she used on neighbors and school boards. "We came to make peace." The room temperature dropped 5 degrees. My dad didn't move. "Is that so?" She smiled, stepping forward. "I baked your favorite, lemon poppy seed." I stayed rooted at the table, fork dangling in midair as if I could disappear if I didn't breathe too loud. "May we come in?" she asked sweetly, like this was some normal family moment, like she hadn't drained my accounts and threatened me into silence. My father stepped halfway out the door instead, blocking the entrance with his frame. "We're fine," he said, cool and calm. Brielle spoke up then, her voice small. "Mom said it was important, that we should try." She looked at me then, for the first time, not like I was a rival or a stranger, just a girl she used to pass in the hallway. I wanted to believe it, that maybe she was different, that maybe Sharon hadn't twisted every thought in her head. But then Sharon launched into her pitch. "I know I made mistakes," she began, voice trembling just enough to sound like a rehearsed confession. "I was under stress. The finances, the loneliness, David, you were gone, and I panicked. I thought I was keeping order. I never meant to hurt Amelia." I opened my mouth, but Dad held up a hand. His tone was precise, almost clinical. "You used her as an ATM, you isolated her, and when she didn't submit, you threatened her." Sharon blinked, caught. "It wasn't like that. You had a choice," he continued. "To be a parent or a tyrant, you chose control. You don't get to walk in with frosting and call that healing." Her smile faltered. Behind her, Brielle shifted uncomfortably. "David," Sharon tried again, her voice cracking now. Please, don't let this get uglier than it has to. We can work this out for the family. He stepped forward just an inch, but it was enough. The moment you made Amelia feel like she had to protect me from you, that's the moment you stopped being family. Sharon's face went pale. And me? I sat there, stunned. Because he said it so clearly, because I hadn't expected him to choose so loudly. The silence stretched. Then my dad reached out and gently closed the door. I heard the shuffle of retreating footsteps, the sound of heels on the walkway, a car door closing, then nothing. He turned to me. You okay? I nodded, though my pulse was still racing. That was, I started, then stopped. He sat down across from me, picked up his half-eaten pancake. Overdue. We didn't eat the cake, didn't even open the box. He left it outside on the doorstep, and by nightfall it was gone. But something stayed. A line had been drawn. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't the one standing alone on the wrong side of it. There's a certain stillness that comes after confrontation. Not peace exactly, more like a pause before the next shot. The morning after Sharon's surprise visit, I woke up to the sound of rustling paper and the soft click of a pen. Dad was already at the dining table, coffee steaming beside him, documents spread across the surface like a jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box. Bank statements, transaction histories, and credit card bills, all printed and color-coded with a kind of military precision. Good morning, he said without looking up. Hope you're ready to do some forensic accounting. I blinked, still foggy. What? He pushed a chair out with his foot. We're going to follow every dollar I sent while I was deployed. I want to see what she did with it. I joined him, hair a mess, still in my sleep shirt. He handed me a highlighter. Green is for groceries, blue is anything that makes sense, red is suspicious. Define suspicious, I asked, flipping through the pages. $1,800 at Saks Fifth Avenue, while I was in a tent with a bucket shower. Got it. We worked in silence at first. Line by line, we went through 9 months of spending. There were the expected things, gas, utilities, pharmacy pickups, but then came the spa packages, jewelry, international shipping, one charge from a boutique furniture store in Paris. I don't even have a passport, I muttered. Dad looked up from his page. She bought a custom Italian dining table the month your electricity was shut off. I stared at the paper in disbelief. She told me we were in a budgeting phase, said if I kept asking for money, she'd cut my phone line. She already had. He slid over my old cell phone bill. 3 months late, paid only after she sold my watch. The numbers became more than numbers, they were echoes of decisions I'd never made. She'd funded her lifestyle with my silence, and I had starved quietly in her shadow, too ashamed to speak up. I should have known, I whispered. Dad didn't say anything at first, just took a sip of coffee and kept marking. Eventually, he glanced up. She manipulated both of us. Don't carry her shame. I didn't know how not to, but I nodded anyway. By noon, the table was covered in paper. My fingers were stained with ink, and my head was pounding from trying to make sense of the mess Sharon had left behind. But it was also empowering. To name the theft, to see it clearly, to finally stop gaslighting myself into believing I was overreacting. I saw a pattern, luxury for her, limits for me, power disguised as parenting. I circled a set of charges in red and slid the page across to Dad. She bought a second car while I was taking the bus to school. His pen paused midair. Are you serious? It's a Mercedes. He looked up at me. Millie, this is a gold mine. What do we do with it? He leaned back, the beginnings of a smile forming. We take it to the lawyer. Later that afternoon, we drove to a tidy office building on a quiet street downtown. The law firm plaque was etched in gold, understated but unmistakable. David's longtime attorney, Leland Price, greeted us in a pressed navy suit and wire-frame glasses. He was the kind of man who didn't speak unless his words were already prepared like evidence in court. We sat in a small meeting room, the air smelling faintly of leather and lemon polish. Dad handed him the folder. Mr. Price flipped through it slowly. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't gasp. Just nodded, page after page, until he finally set it down and folded his hands. This, he said simply, is damning. She drained almost $50,000 in 9 months, Dad said, and she left my daughter living like a squatter. Mr. Price tapped the folder. You've got everything I need for fraud, financial coercion, and misappropriation of marital assets, possibly even identity theft, depending on how she accessed Amelia's accounts. I shifted in my seat. Do we have to go to court? His eyes softened just a little. Ideally, no, but this level of evidence gives us leverage. We don't approach her yet, not until we've assembled the full picture. He turned to me. Amelia, I know this has been traumatic, but if you're willing to help me finish the documentation, your testimony will make the case bulletproof. I looked at Dad, then back at Mr. Price. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, and I meant it, because now I understood the cost of silence. Now I knew exactly what had been stolen. Not just money, but safety, freedom, dignity. And I wanted it all back. It's strange how quickly you can get used to someone being home again. How the sound of footsteps in the kitchen, the smell of black coffee, or the way someone leaves the bathroom light on just long enough for you to see where you're going, starts to feel normal. And then, just as suddenly, it's gone. Dad left on a classified assignment the following Tuesday. It wasn't long, just a few days at the base for briefings and clearance updates. But the minute he buttoned up his uniform jacket and strapped his duffel over his shoulder, something inside me twisted tight. I'll be back before the hearing, he said, gripping my shoulder with one hand. Nothing changes while I'm gone, you stay sharp. I tried to smile. I'm not a kid anymore, remember? He nodded once. I know. And then he was gone. The apartment felt bigger without him in it, too quiet. But not empty. This time, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space, like breathing room. I let myself have one evening to sulk, ordered takeout, curled up in the corner of the couch in his old hoodie, and watched a trashy reality show I'd never admit to enjoying. But by morning, I was at the table again, sleeves rolled up, laptop open, highlighters ready. Mr. Price had left me with homework. Organize every receipt, digital transaction, and message related to Sharon's financial activity. The evidence we'd gathered was solid, but it wasn't complete, not yet. And if there was one thing I'd learned from surviving the last 9 months, it was that the only way to stay afloat was to keep moving. So I did. I started with the online statements, cross-referencing Dad's deployment dates with major purchases. Then I cataloged emails, reminders of appointments she'd never told us about, forwarded receipts for luxury brands, even an invoice for a landscaping service in her name that billed to his card. Some of it made me sick. There was a spa membership she maintained for herself and Brielle, a recurring Amazon subscription for organic meal kits, while I'd been living off instant noodles and discounted cereal. She'd used Dad's military credentials to get a discount on high-end electronics, then resold them. I found the listings, screenshots, confirmation emails. The betrayal wasn't just about money, it was about how confidently she'd done it, how easy it had been, how invisible I must have been to her for this to feel justified. Midway through Thursday, I took a break to walk to the corner coffee shop, mostly for the caffeine, but partly because my eyes were starting to blur from staring at transaction logs. The barista recognized me now. I guess showing up 3 days in a row with a binder and a highlighter tends to leave an impression. "Back at it?" she asked, handing me my drink. "Always," I said and meant it. When I got back, I pinned a fresh sheet of notes to the board I'd set up in the living room. It was a weirdly satisfying ritual, piecing the puzzle together like some true crime documentary, except the villain used to make me lentil casserole and lecture me about posture. I could have been bitter. I could have given in to the shame. But there was a strange clarity that came with seeing the facts laid out in black and white. For once, I wasn't drowning in maybe I'm overreacting or she didn't mean it. She meant it, and I had the receipts. That night, I FaceTimed Dad. He was in a dim hotel room near the base, still in uniform, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "Apartment still standing," he joked. "Barely," I smiled. "But the evidence wall is looking fierce." He leaned in. "Proud of you, Millie. You're taking control." I shrugged, suddenly shy. "It just feels good to see it, to know it wasn't in my head." He nodded slowly. "It never was, but now we have proof. That's power." After we hung up, I looked around the apartment again. It still wasn't perfect. The bookshelves were uneven. The couch had a mystery stain I hadn't tackled yet. The sunflower curtains were starting to fade, but it felt like mine now, mine and safe. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to save me, because I was already doing it, one document at a time. It was still early, barely past 7, when I heard the knock. 3 firm raps, no rhythm, no hesitation. The kind of knock that doesn't belong to a neighbor borrowing sugar or a delivery driver with hands full of styrofoam trays. It was official, authoritative, and it sent a chill down my spine before I even reached the door. I peeked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers. My stomach dropped. I opened the door slowly, confused, a little breathless. "Can I help you?" The taller officer, whose badge read GORDON, gave me a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Amelia Holtz." "Yes. We need to ask you some questions about recent financial activity linked to your accounts." I blinked. "What kind of financial activity?" He didn't answer. Instead, the other officer, a younger woman with a notebook already in hand, said, "You're not under arrest, but we do need you to come with us to the station." The air seemed to vanish from the room. I haven't done anything wrong. Is this about Sharon?" They didn't answer that either. My mind raced. I'd done everything by the book, kept documentation, logged the receipts, even filed things by category like some kind of vigilante accountant. But all I could think in that moment was, did she flip it? Did Sharon lie first? Did she go to the police before we could serve her legally? I stood there in the doorway, frozen in my own socks. "You can bring your phone and ID," Officer Gordon said, clearly practiced in guiding people through confusion. "You won't be there long." I should have asked more questions. I should have called Mr. Price. But I was tired, off guard, and still used to being the one who just obeyed when someone spoke with authority. So I nodded. I slipped on shoes with shaky hands, grabbed my bag, and followed them out the door. The precinct was colder than I expected. Not physically, but emotionally. Clinical. They took my phone almost immediately. "I'd like to call my lawyer," I said, trying to inject strength into my voice. "You'll have a chance to do that shortly," the woman officer said without meeting my eyes. I was guided into a small gray room with a metal table and 2 chairs. No one handcuffed me, but the message was clear. "Sit, wait, don't speak unless asked." I sat and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I watched the minute hand crawl, wondering if Dad had tried to call, if he knew I hadn't answered, if he'd feel the same rush of helplessness I had every time I'd stared into that fridge and wondered where his money had gone. The door finally swung open, and I braced myself for more questions, but instead in walked Mr. Leland Price, calm, dressed in a tailored navy suit and carrying a folder that seemed to hum with contained fury. "She's done here," he said to someone in the hallway. "We're leaving." No debate, no argument. He turned to me with a nod. "Let's go." I stood, legs numb, heart hammering. The officers didn't stop us, didn't explain, didn't apologize. Outside in the hallway, I finally found my voice. "What the hell just happened?" Leland walked briskly, not stopping. "Sharon filed a police report late last night accusing you of fraud, claimed you'd been stealing from her accounts and using David's deployment to cover it." I stopped in my tracks. "She said I stole from her." He nodded grimly. "She flipped the script that fast." We stepped into the elevator. I leaned back against the wall, shaking. "And the police just believed her. They opened an inquiry. That's all they needed to bring you in for questioning. But your father anticipated this." My brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He looked at me, eyes serious. "He had a feeling she'd try something desperate. That's why he left me as point of contact. He told me if anything happened, if you even got a parking ticket, to be ready." The elevator dinged. Outside, the city looked exactly the same. Bright sky, passing cars, people walking their dogs. It felt surreal, like I'd stepped out of a movie scene no one else could see. "She's really trying to frame me," I whispered. "She's trying to cast doubt," he corrected. "But she didn't expect you to have everything logged, time-stamped, and cataloged. She made a move, now it's our turn." We reached the car. He held the door for me, then paused. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "I will be." But as I stared out the window, hands curled into fists in my lap, one thought rang louder than the rest. She thinks I'm still that girl who stays quiet. She has no idea what's coming. The ride home from the station was quiet, at least externally. Inside me, it was chaos. I kept replaying everything. The knock, the walk through the cold station, The way the officers refused to meet my eyes like they were embarrassed on my behalf but not enough to question protocol. The way Sharon's lies had clicked into place before I even had a chance to respond. "She really filed a report," I said, breaking the silence. "She looked at all the evidence we have, all the pain she caused, and just made herself the victim." Mr. Price's hands gripped the wheel. "Sharon's not stupid. She's calculated. Filing the report was her way of muddying the water, making it look like a messy family squabble instead of a clean fraud case. But doesn't it hurt her credibility?" I asked. "I mean, if she's accusing me of something when we've got literal spreadsheets of her theft." "Eventually, yes, but in the meantime it gives her leverage, or she thinks it does. Her goal isn't truth, it's confusion. She wants the judge to see a family too tangled to trust." I turned to the window, chewing the inside of my cheek. It wasn't just a tactic, it was a warning. She was showing us how far she'd go. We got back to the apartment just after lunch. The moment I stepped inside, I wanted to crawl into bed and not speak to anyone until the end of the year. But Mr. Price had other plans. He set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it like we were back in court already. "We strike back now," he said. I blinked. "How?" "By tightening the case. Your father's return is days away, and when he walks into that courtroom, I want the entire narrative built. We'll show Sharon's motive, her paper trail, and now her attempt to weaponize the legal system." He pulled out a tablet and turned it toward me. "I need you to help me build a timeline, not just purchases, but emotional fallout. When did she first take control of the cards? What did she say? How did your behavior change?" I hesitated. "You want me to narrate what happened?" "I want the truth," he said simply. "Through your eyes. No one can argue with your lived experience, especially when it's backed by receipts." So I began. Slowly, carefully, I walked him through it all. The first time Sharon told me I didn't need access to the joint card. The text messages she'd send, praising me when I stayed quiet, scolding me when I asked questions. I showed him how my school attendance had dropped in February, right after she pulled the food stipend. How I'd stopped buying textbooks or even taking the bus regularly because I couldn't afford both gas and groceries. Mr. Price took it all in without flinching. At one point he asked, "Did you ever confront her?" I shook my head. "She made it clear what would happen if I did. She said if I didn't follow her guidelines, she'd tell Dad I was unstable. That he'd believe her because she handled the money and knew how to talk professionally." He typed notes rapidly. Then he looked up, face harder than I'd seen it. "She used psychological control, financial deprivation, verbal intimidation, all of it fits a pattern." "A pattern of what?" I asked. "Coercive control," he said. "It's often overlooked, but courts are starting to recognize it as abuse." I sat back, breath catching. Abuse. I hadn't said that word out loud, not even to myself. But hearing it spoken quietly, without drama, felt like someone flipping on a light in a room I didn't know I'd been locked inside. "She made me feel crazy," I admitted. "Like I was always one mistake away from losing everything." "And now?" Mr. Price asked. Now I had documents, timelines, texts, screenshots, annotated credit card records, sworn statements from neighbors who remembered me showing up hungry to borrow milk. I had voice memos I'd sent to friends venting, dated and time-stamped. And most of all, I had my dad. Even if he wasn't home yet, he'd believed me. He was coming back. "She underestimated us," I said finally. Mr. Price gave a rare, wry smile. "She won't make that mistake twice." That evening, after he left, I sat alone at the kitchen table with the lamp glowing soft beside me. I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Statement of events. Amelia Holtz, age 19 then I started writing." Not a legal document, not a diary, just the truth. What it felt like to get those cards taken away. What it felt like to eat dinner in silence while Sharon talked about her new handbags. What it felt like to keep secrets for the sake of peace. What it cost me. And somewhere in the middle of that page, I stopped feeling like a victim. I felt ready. Like someone who was walking towards something, not running from it. She could file reports. She could twist stories. But what she didn't know, what she never understood, was that she wasn't dealing with the scared girl who used to whisper apologies and fold under guilt. Not anymore. He was back before sunrise. I didn't even hear the front door open. Just the soft thud of boots, the quiet rustle of fabric, and then his shadow in the hallway, outlined by the weak morning light. "Dad," I called, already climbing out of bed. "Hey, Millie." His voice was rough from travel, but steady. "I told you I'd be back before the hearing." I threw my arms around him without hesitation. For a long moment he didn't say anything, just held me, solid, unshaken, like he'd been counting the minutes just as closely as I had. "You okay?" he finally asked. I nodded into his shoulder. "Better now." Over coffee, I caught him up. Everything Sharon had pulled, the police station, Mr. Price's timeline strategy. He listened quietly, jaw ticking with every new detail. But he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned forward and placed both elbows on the table. "Then it's time we finish this," he said. "Because now it's not just financial theft, it's legal manipulation." He pulled a small manila folder from his duffel bag and slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked, taking it carefully. Copies of all legal documents Sharon had access to while I was away. House deed, insurance policies, and the will. I froze. "The will?" My voice was barely a whisper. He nodded. "I had one drafted before deployment. Standard stuff, left everything to you in case anything happened to me. She knew that." I opened the folder with trembling hands. And there it was. A second version of the will, stamped and dated 3 months into his deployment. Everything, every asset, every account left to Sharon, sole beneficiary, sole control. I stared at it, my eyes scanning for anything to make it make sense, but there was no explanation, no signature match. The notary stamp looked off too perfect. "She forged it," I said slowly. Dad nodded. "That's what our forensic expert thinks." I blinked. "You already had it examined." "First thing I did when I saw the date," he said. "You were barely holding things together then. If something had happened to me, she would have taken everything. Legally." The air around us thickened. This wasn't just greed, this was planning. She'd looked at the risk of my dad dying in deployment and turned it into an opportunity. "She wanted to erase me," I murmured. "No," he said, voice harder than I'd heard it in days. "She wanted to replace you." There was a long silence. Then he reached across the table and put a hand on mine. "We take this to Price. Today." By noon, we were back in the firm's glass-walled conference room. Mr. Price didn't say much at first as he examined the forged will under a magnifying glass. Just a low whistle, then a curt nod. "This," he said, holding it up, "is game over for her." He laid it beside the real one. Same letterhead, different content, different notary seal. "I'll bring in a forensic document analyst to testify," he said. "This isn't just fraud, it's premeditated asset reallocation with intent to deceive. Add it to the coercion, the financial abuse, and the false police report. She won't walk away from this with a dime." Dad sat back, arms crossed. "We don't just want to win, we want it permanent, no more loopholes." "You'll have it," Mr. Price said. "But we keep this quiet until the hearing. Let her come in smug. Let her underestimate us." He turned to me. "Amelia, if you're ready, we present everything in court, all of it. Your statement, the documents, the forged will." I looked at my father, at the mountain of proof we'd built, at the girl I used to be, quiet, small, afraid to ask for help. Then I looked back at Mr. Price. "I'm ready." The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, though the air conditioning was way too aggressive, but emotionally. Like even the walls had learned not to react, just observe, just record. Dad sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, his uniform crisp, his shoulders square. Mr. Price stood in front of us with a quiet sort of intensity, flipping through his brief one last time. Across the aisle sat Sharon, in a tailored navy dress and pearls so bright they nearly glinted. Brielle was behind her, arms folded, face expressionless. Sharon wasn't crying yet, but I could tell she'd practiced it. Her shoulders were tilted just right, her lips slightly pursed. She looked like a woman burdened by betrayal, not like the woman who had committed it. When the judge entered, everyone stood. And then the proceedings began. It started formally. Mr. Price submitted our evidence in order, transaction logs, flagged credit card charges, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen me struggling alone during the deployment. Dad and I had gone over everything a dozen times. Still, I held my breath through all of it. Then Sharon's attorney began. She played the victim immediately. said Sharon had been overwhelmed by responsibilities in David's absence, that she'd managed the household alone and was forced to make difficult choices for the good of the family. The judge raised an eyebrow at that. Then came Sharon's testimony. She stood confidently, a hand on the edge of the witness stand like she was posing for a magazine shoot. "I never meant to exclude Amelia," she said sweetly. "There were misunderstandings. She was adjusting to adulthood, and I was simply trying to guide her." She glanced at the judge. "We didn't always agree, but I always provided. I made sacrifices. I was the only mother figure she had." I felt my father tense beside me. "And the allegations of fraud," her lawyer prompted, her eyes filled with tears on cue. "I was heartbroken," she whispered, "to see those charges and think maybe Amelia had taken advantage of our trust. That's why I went to the police. I thought I was protecting our family." Mr. Price stood the moment the judge nodded. "No further questions?" Sharon's lawyer shook her head. "Then I'd like to begin our response." He moved with precision, measured, intentional. "No judgment today is about feelings," he began, "though there are plenty. This is about facts, dates, documents." He turned to the projection screen. "Exhibit 24. Credit card charges under Sharon Holtz's name, billed to Colonel Holtz's deployment account, categorized as non-essential luxury purchases." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The screen filled with dollar signs, spa services, jewelry, a Mercedes-Benz, a landscaping bill for a house Amelia didn't live in. He moved to the next exhibit, then the next. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the performance Sharon had tried so hard to give. Then came the forged will. The room changed when it was introduced. Even the court clerk blinked twice. Mr. Price explained the timeline, the discrepancies in the notary seal, the inconsistency in David's signature, then presented a sworn affidavit from the original notary confirming she had not certified any will during that time period. Finally, he called me to the stand. My hands shook. I told the truth anyway. I described the text messages, the silence, the withheld money. I explained how I'd gone to the food pantry during finals week because Sharon said my budgeting was poor. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because my voice shook with something better than pity. Conviction. When I stepped down, I saw Sharon for the first time with no mask. Her face was hard, tight, pale, she knew. The judge leaned forward slightly, fingers steepled. "This isn't just theft," he said, voice even. "This is betrayal layered with fraud. And frankly, manipulation so persistent it bordered on systemic abuse." You could have heard a pin drop. My father reached over and took my hand. His grip was firm. And finally, I believed it. We were going to win. The judge's words rang like a bell, clear, final, impossible to ignore. "The court finds the amended will to be fraudulent and therefore null and void. All assets are to be returned to Colonel David Holtz. Sharon Holtz is ordered to vacate the La Mesa property within 7 days, surrender all jointly held vehicles, and pay restitution for misappropriated funds." Sharon's mouth fell open before the sound escaped. A short, stunned breath, half sob, half disbelief. "No, this is a mistake," she sputtered, rising halfway before her attorney pulled gently at her arm. Brielle sat frozen, eyes wide, jaw tight. She didn't move. Not toward her mother, not toward me. I didn't expect her to. The judge's gavel dropped once. Case closed. I didn't cry. I thought I might. I thought I'd collapse in relief or run out of the room, but I didn't. I just stood, taller than I had in years, and looked across the aisle as Sharon reached for me. "Amelia," she started, her voice soft and trembling now. "Please," I met her eyes. "You stole years from me," I said, my voice calm, clear. "I'm taking them back now." She blinked like she didn't understand the language, and maybe she didn't. Because for once I wasn't begging or pleading or shrinking. I was done. Beside me, Dad turned, his eyes red but steady. "You were never alone," he whispered just for me. "I should have seen it sooner." I nodded. "I know." And that was it, not the end of everything, but the beginning of something real, ours. The sun felt different now. Brighter, maybe. Or maybe I was just noticing it for the first time in a long while. It streamed through the apartment's windows, soft and golden, casting long morning shadows across the rug we'd found secondhand, and somehow it looked perfect. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my pajamas, flipping pancakes while Dad scrolled through the news on his tablet. No tension, no silence, just the sound of butter sizzling and a steady calm that felt like healing. He glanced over the screen. "You know," he said, "we haven't had a single letter from Sharon's lawyer since the ruling. Not a peep." "That's because we buried her in truth," I said, pouring more batter. He chuckled softly. "That we did." I plated his food and sat across from him, stirring my coffee, stalling, because I had something to say, something I'd been thinking about for weeks, but I wasn't sure how he'd take it. "I've made a decision," I said finally. He looked up. "I want to enlist." His eyebrows rose, but he didn't speak. Not right away. I pressed forward. "I know it's not something I ever seriously considered, but watching you handle everything, watching how you fought for me and what's right, I realized I want that kind of strength, that kind of purpose." He set the tablet down, his expression unreadable. "I'm not doing it to follow you," I added quickly. "I'm doing it because for the first time I feel like I can choose. I'm not running from something, I'm running toward something." There was a long pause. Then he smiled, not the usual grin, not the proud parent's smirk, something deeper. "You've already proven your strength," he said quietly, "but the country would be lucky to have you." And just like that, I felt it in my bones. This was a new chapter, and I wasn't afraid of the page turning anymore. The Virginia sun beat down on the military base parade ground, glinting off dozens of polished medals and freshly pressed uniforms. My boots were lined up with the others, heels tight, shoulders square. I stood tall, eyes forward, chin steady. When they called my name, the applause didn't come from strangers. It came from the people who knew, who understood what it took to stand here. "Private First Class Amelia Holtz, commendation for excellence in leadership and resilience in training." I stepped forward, saluted with precision, and accepted the medal with hands that no longer trembled. In the crowd, Dad stood in uniform too, off duty for the week, but as sharp and proud as ever. He raised his hand in a clean salute, one that said more than words ever could. He knew what this meant. Not just survival, not just justice, but strength, ownership, renewal. And sitting several rows behind him, trying very hard not to be noticed, were Sharon and Brielle. I hadn't expected them, but I saw them. Two figures in plain clothes, no pearls, no power, just silence. Their assets were frozen. The condo they rented was modest and temporary. Brielle had withdrawn from her private school and was working part-time now. I didn't know much else, and I didn't need to, because this wasn't about them anymore. This moment, this life was mine. As the ceremony ended and the crowd began to shift and clap and gather, Dad found me by the staging area. He hugged me once. Tight, no words. When he pulled back, I saw it in his eyes, what I'd waited so long to see. Not just pride, respect. "You're not just my daughter anymore," he said. "You're a soldier, a survivor, a damn force." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. I learned from the best. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it. Not because of what I'd lost, but because of what I'd taken back. My name, my voice, my life.